Well, President Joe Biden announced today that he would be removing Russia's trade designation of most favored nation. Here's what that sounded like. Listen.
Each of our nations is going to take steps to deny most favored nation status to Russia. A most favored nation status designation means two countries have agreed to trade with each other under the best possible terms. Low tariffs, few barriers of trade, and the highest possible imports allowed. In the United States, we call this permanent normal trade relations, PNTR, but it's the same thing. Revoking PNTR for Russia is going to make it harder for Russia to do business with the United States, and doing it in unison with other nations to make up half of the global economy will be another crushing blow to the Russian economy. It's already suffering very badly from our sanctions.
Now, earlier today, we heard Gordon Chang talking about the new relationship, the banking relationships being set up between Russia and China. So will that actually provide crushing consequences to Vladimir Putin, as President Biden suggests? With me to discuss that and the Biden administration's absurd energy policies is economist, as well as the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, Dr. John Lott. John, good to see you as always. Okay, here's the president making this declaration. Your reaction?
You know, most of his comments about devastating sanctions have been absurd. So for example, he talks about sanctioning now 8 banks in Russia. There are 333 banks. So if they want to go and transfer funds, they have 325 other banks to go and do it through. Europe wanted to completely remove Russian banks from SWIFT, which is the international computer network that allows the transfer of funds. We didn't want that because we wanted to still be able to go and buy Russian oil at that time. The thing is also with regard to us, sanctioning Russia with regard to trade really has no impact. About 12% of our GDP involves exports. Russia involves 0.3%, 0.3% of our export go to Russia. 0.7% of our imports come from Russia, and of course they're overwhelmingly energy-related type things like oil. Europe has much bigger impact on these things than we do. It's just.
But the real punishment, John, I mean, honestly, the real punishment, because I was asking you this in the break, I said, what are you paying for gas in Montana? You said $4 now, just over. We're at about double. In Michigan, it was 2.25 on the 21st of January, 21, when Joe Biden took over. It's $4.49 at most of the stations around now, so it's about double what it was. And you think about that. If you own one car and you drive 20,000 miles, and you get 20 miles a gallon, that's 1,000 gallons of fuel you use to go back and forth to work, and you're paying $225, that's $2,250 more you're paying this year to go to work. I mean, it's remarkable. And if you have 2 cars in the driveway, well, you're $5,000 in the hole. This is real money to families, isn't it?
Oh no, it's huge. But Biden wants to refuse any responsibility for this. One time he said inflation wasn't a problem. And then he wanted to go and blame it on the oil companies, and then he wanted to go and blame it on OPEC, and now he wants to go and blame it on Russia with the war in Ukraine. We just had the inflation numbers come out this week. It's 7.9% year over year. But if you just look at the rate in February, which, by the way, is computed before the war broke out. They basically take the numbers from the middle of the month. It went up at an annual rate of 9.6% inflation. Biden and his administration immediately.
So then that's my question for you, because I was wondering about that. The consumer price index, as you pointed out, went up 7.9%. The inflation rate, I thought it was 9.7, but 9.6. What difference does that make? My question to you is, now you have this huge spike. Not just in gasoline, but in heating oil and propane and natural gas, and therefore the products on the shelves at the grocery store and all of those things. Inflation will have to be in the double digits, won't it, next time they give us a report?
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't shown up any of the impact from that yet. The thing is, it's basically changes in the money supply that drive inflation. And so if some prices go up, other prices will go down or won't go up as much because it's basically what happens to the money supply. And what's been happening over the last year is that we've been spending a lot more money than we've been bringing in tax revenue, and the Federal Reserve has been printing up money in order to try to cover that gap that's there. And
so two other things I want to ask you about because of all of that, because I think it's going to be devastating. When you look at people that are living paycheck to paycheck, which according to a lot of studies, is about 60% of the people in the country,
right,
and you crank up the cost of fuel, of heating the home, of electricity, all of it, it's going to create a homeless surge, I believe, in America, because people aren't going to be able to make the mortgage payment or the rent payment or whatever it turns out to be. And the second part is this will be a devastating blow, I believe, for small business. Those that hung on during the pandemic now, in order to hire somebody new, that new hire, well, they need more money to pay for gas and groceries and everything else. So they need more money. And maybe it's too much for this company to afford. So the company can't afford the employees they need. They go out of business. Or they do hire these people for more money than they can truly afford, which also forces them out of business. I think a lot of small companies are in big trouble today because of what we're seeing. I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, look, when you have a big spike in, let's say, oil costs, what happens is that some companies are going to find their costs are going to go up a lot. They're going to cut back. Employees don't instantly move from one job to another. And so when you have these types of dislocations that occur, you're going to create unemployment. There's no doubt about that. The problem is that Biden could be doing lots of things in order to try to keep the price of gasoline and heating oil down. He could allow production to increase. Instead, the fact that they're doubling down and tripling down and saying, well, we're not going to change our policies, or our policies aren't, relevant to the changes in prices. I mean, it's just not serious. Anybody with even a tiny bit of economics knows that if you reduce the supply, we're in a worldwide market. But if you reduce American supply, you're going to make it so that prices are going to be higher than they would have otherwise. If he wanted to really hurt what he would do is he would open the spigots as much as he could for American
Absolutely.
production. That's what
Flood
really
the
would
supply.
hurt them. Right, because they're going to find ways around a lot of these sanctions that are there, and but he refuses to do that.
It's incompetence. Here's the problem, John, and I got to leave it here, but here's the bottom line for me. United States Congress is made up 92% of lawyers. They are financially illiterate, most of them. Never run businesses, never owned companies, never had to make payroll. That's why they don't understand it. Dr. John Lott from the Crime Prevention Research Center. You can find out more at crimeprevention.org. Crimeprevention.org, there you have it. Always great to have John on. He is an economist by trade. His book's mostly on firearms. Interesting stuff.